My son-in-law thought I was blind to his deceit. He thought of me as a frail old man with trembling hands fading memory and a soft heart too weak to suspect betrayal. But he was wrong. The day he crept into my room, certain that he could pluck another few hundred from my wallet without consequence, was the day his smug confidence shattered. What he saw in that moment will haunt him forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My hands shook as I counted the bills once more. 20, 40, 60. The notes blurred into each other, the ink smearing in my tired eyes, but the number didn't change no matter how many times I counted. $1,000 gone. I sat at the edge of my bed, the leather wallet heavy in my palm. Worn, scarred, and softened by time, it had once belonged to my father. He had carried it through war, through poverty, through the lean years that carved strength into his bones. Every morning since I was a boy, I had seen him reach for it in the same place on his nightstand. And now at 68, I had carried on the ritual. Reach, open, count. Reliable as sunrise. But this morning was wrong, bitterly wrong. Maybe I spent it, I muttered aloud, though the words rang hollow. On what groceries? My quiet coffee at Murphy's Diner. $1,000 doesn't just disappear into eggs and toast. I searched anyway, under the bed, beneath the dresser drawers, inside every jacket pocket. My hands turned frantic, clumsy, tossing clothes, pulling books from shelves until the floor was littered with fragments of my life. Nothing. Not a single stray bill. The sick heaviness in my stomach thickened, spreading like lead through my chest. Downstairs, the scent of bacon wafted upward, mocking me with its warmth. Helen's soft humming floated through the house, a tune from some old radio station she loved. They were normal sounds, sounds of comfort, but this morning they felt off, crooked as though the frame of our lives had been nudged askew. I descended the staircase slowly, each step heavier than the last. Helen stood at the stove, dusted with flour, her blue apron tied neatly, her hair drawn back in the same ponytail she'd worn since high school. She turned with a smile. "Morning, Dad. Coffee's ready." "Helen," I said carefully, "you haven't seen my money, have you? $1,000 is missing." Her smile faltered. Concern flickered in her eyes. "Money, Dad? I haven't taken anything from your room. Are you sure you didn't forget? Maybe you spent it somewhere and just don't recall." The words struck harder than they should have. Forget. Misplace. Was that what they thought of me now? That I was one of those pitiful old men wandering minds' loose accusations? No grip on reality before I could respond. A voice cut through. "What are you two whispering about?" Cleo stood in the doorway, his work clothes still rumpled from yesterday. His eyes, dark, watchful, shifted between Helen and me. "Money problems, again," he said flatly. I forced my voice calm. "Cleo, you haven't been in my room, have you?" His body stiffened like a soldier readying for battle. He crossed his arms, squared his shoulders. "What exactly are you implying, Mr. Hargrove? That I'm some kind of thief?" "I'm not implying anything," I replied evenly. "I'm only asking. I work 16-hour days to keep this family afloat." His voice snapped sharp and high. "I don't need to steal from anyone, least of all from you." Helen rushed between us, hands fluttering. "Dad, Cleo would never. There has to be some other explanation." But I watched Cleo's face closely, the flicker in his eyes that couldn't quite meet mine, the sharpness in his voice too rehearsed, too quick. His anger wasn't innocence. It was fear painted in loud colors. Something cold settled in my chest. "Of course," I said softly. "I'm sure it will turn up." Cleo snatched his lunch bag from the counter, checked his reflection in the hallway mirror with unusual care, then slammed the door behind him. Helen touched my arm gently. "Dad, ever since Mom passed, you've been under so much strain. Sometimes grief, it makes us imagine things." I nodded, though my eyes followed Cleo's truck as it roared down Maple Street. Imagine things? No. I had lived alone for 3 years after my wife's death. I knew every dollar in that wallet like I knew every scar on my own hands. This wasn't grief. This wasn't forgetfulness. I was being robbed. That evening, the house looked almost normal. Helen sat folding laundry on the couch, her hands working through Cleo's shirts with practiced care. I sat in my chair, the newspaper open, but unread, the words dissolving into shadows. And Cleo, he couldn't keep still. He paced near the window, checked his phone every few minutes, adjusted the blinds though the view hadn't changed. His nervous energy pulsed through the room like static before a storm. I watched in silence, my heart a stone in my chest. The time for pretending was over. Honey Cleo's voice broke the silence, sudden and oddly cheerful, too bright to feel real. He turned to Helen with a grin that looked painted on. "I have a surprise for you. Close your eyes." Helen blinked in surprise, her face lighting with childlike delight. "Lo, what did you do?" "Just close your eyes and hold out your hand," he urged, slipping his hand inside his jacket pocket with a flourish. From behind my newspaper, I lowered the pages just enough to see. There it was, a small velvet jewelry box. Not the kind you buy at discount stores or from clearance racks at the mall. No, this was the kind of box that came from downtown, those polished shops where the glass sparkled like diamonds themselves, and men in suits carried trays with gloved hands. Helen gasped when she opened it. "Oh my goodness, it's beautiful." Her fingers trembled as they lifted the delicate gold chain, catching the warm glow of the living room lamp. The light seemed to dance on every link. Real gold. Not plated, not cheap. 18 carats at least. I'd worked 4 decades in Detroit's automotive industry, handling materials, metals, parts. You learn to recognize authenticity when it stares you in the face. Helen's voice quivered with joy. "Lo, where did you get the money for this?" Cleo's chest swelled with practiced pride. "Picked up extra shifts at the warehouse. Worked all weekend, double overtime pay." I raised an eyebrow. "You didn't mention weekend shifts." "Wanted it to be a surprise," he said quickly, fastening the clasp behind Helen's neck. "When you want to provide for your family, you find ways." Helen turned to the mirror, tears shimmering in her eyes as she touched the chain against her skin. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me." She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. I folded the newspaper carefully, not taking my eyes off them. "Warehouse pays well these days, huh?" My tone was casual, almost idle curiosity. His smile twitched just a fraction. "Time and a half on Saturday, double time on Sunday. Plus hazard pay handling chemicals. Dangerous work, but worth it to see my wife smile." I leaned back, my mind already working through numbers. Because the math didn't lie, not ever. The chain, at least $800, maybe $900, and my wallet exactly $1,000 missing. The coincidence was too sharp, too neat to ignore. "You're spoiling her," I said lightly, forcing the corners of my mouth upward. "She deserves it," Cleo replied. But then his eyes, his dark, narrow eyes, met mine. And in that brief glance beneath the smile, there was challenge. A dare. "Say it out loud, old man. I dare you." As he sat down, the faint crinkle of paper reached my ears. His back pocket, a receipt. And in the split second before he adjusted himself, I caught the logo. Silverman's Fine Jewelry, Woodward Avenue. Not a place where truck drivers and weekend warehouse loaders shopped. "Well," I said, standing, stretching slowly, "long day tomorrow. I'll turn in early." "Dad, are you feeling all right?" Helen asked, her eyes still shining as she admired her reflection, fingers grazing the golden chain like it was spun sunlight. "Just tired, sweetheart," I murmured. "Good night." But I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, my father's worn wallet in my hands, listening. Downstairs, their voices mingled, Helen's laughter, bright and pure, Cleo's baritone humming with satisfaction. To Helen, it was domestic bliss. To me, it was evidence stacking higher, louder, heavier with each note of laughter. The money missing, the expensive jewelry, the lies about work, all threads in a pattern too familiar for me to deny. I'd been an engineer for 43 years. Problems had solutions if you followed the evidence, no matter how bitter the conclusion. 3 weeks later, at 8 in the morning, I sat once again on my bed, staring into the hollow of my wallet. My fingers counted slowly, deliberately. And there it was, exactly $500 gone. No confusion this time. No self-doubt. No whispered fear that grief had muddled my memory. This was theft. Cold, deliberate, repeated. And I knew with a clarity that chilled my bones that the man my daughter called her husband was stealing from me, smiling as he did it, hiding behind gifts, and tightening his hold on this family while he bled us dry. I'd been checking my wallet every morning since the first theft, like clockwork, writing invisible ledgers in my mind. Every bill had a place, Every dollar had a story. Yesterday evening, I had counted 8 crisp hundreds folded neatly behind the leather flap. This morning, only 3 remained. 500 vanished while the house slept. Helen's steady breathing down the hall, the soft tick of the old grandfather clock, the hum of the refrigerator, everything in the house had been still, except Cleo. He had come home late again a little after 11:30. The door had creaked, his boots heavy against the floorboards, and when he'd passed my room, the faint sour tang of beer trailed after him. A man who claimed he was working overtime at the warehouse, yet smelled of bars and neon signs. And then this morning, 6 a.m., long before his usual routine, he was whistling in the bathroom, humming as if life was good, as if he hadn't just robbed me blind under my own roof. The pattern was clear now, almost elegant in its cruelty. Steal, act normal, sprinkle charm and gifts like breadcrumbs in front of Helen until her loyalty bent away from her father and toward her husband. Little by little, he was building a wall between us, brick by brick, with my own stolen money as mortar. But I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I set the wallet down on my nightstand, its worn leather surface catching a sliver of morning light, and reached for the phone. My voice was calm, precise, almost businesslike. Operator, connect me to Detroit Electronics Downtown District. The line clicked and a cheerful voice greeted me. Detroit Electronics, how can I help you today? Yes, good morning. Do you carry small hidden cameras? Yes, sir. We have several models. What's the application? Home security. Something discreet. We've got wireless units with night vision motion activation, connects to your smartphone. Very popular these days. Perfect. I'll be in this morning. Downstairs, Helen was already in her uniform, pinning her hair back ready for her shift at the supermarket. When she saw me coming down the stairs in my good jacket, she frowned softly. Dad, where are you headed so early into town? I said evenly, grabbing my keys. Need to pick something up from the electronics store. She smiled. Cleo mentioned driving that way this morning. Want him to give you a ride? The irony twisted sharp in my chest. The thief chauffeuring his victim. No thanks. I prefer to drive myself. She kissed my cheek, warm, trusting. Be careful, Dad. They're tearing up half of Woodward for construction. I nodded, my throat tightening. I hated the deception, hated that I couldn't tell her the truth, not yet. Not until I had proof so clear, so undeniable, that even love's blind loyalty couldn't cover it. In my car, I paused before backing out, staring into the rearview mirror. For the first time in months, the reflection staring back wasn't the confused, grieving widower who misplaced things and second-guessed himself. No, this was the engineer again, the man who had spent 43 years solving problems with equations, blueprints, and precision. Cleo thought he was stealing from a forgetful old man. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I drove steadily toward downtown Detroit, the city unfolding like a rusted machine still grinding forward. Gray buildings, graffiti, cold steel bridges over the river. My mind ticked through the specs I'd need. Night vision motion activation, discreet enough to vanish into furniture, smartphone alerts, maybe audio recording if Michigan law would allow it. Evidence first, confrontation second, justice third. The game had changed. Cleo just didn't know it yet. Tech World Electronics sat on Woodward Avenue, its neon sign buzzing faintly against the pale morning sky. I parked carefully between 2 compact cars, my eyes noting the store's own security cameras, mounted high, watching every angle. If I was going to catch a thief, I needed to think like one. The electronic chime above the door rang out as I stepped inside. Rows of gleaming gadgets stretched before me, smartphones, tablets, shelves of polished black and silver equipment. A young clerk, hair messy and thick glasses slipping down his nose, looked up from behind the counter. He probably wondered what an old man like me wanted with technology like this. Morning, sir. Can I help you find something specific? I straightened my shoulders, meeting his gaze. Yes. Home security cameras. The best ones you've got. Something discreet but reliable. I repeated, my voice lower, almost measured. The young clerk's face brightened, eager to be useful. Residential or commercial application? Personal, I said after a pause. I need clear image quality, especially in low-light conditions. He nodded knowingly, leading me to a wall filled with gleaming boxes. Each one was covered in bold promises: night vision motion detection cloud, storage, smartphone connectivity. Features that once upon a time had belonged only in spy films and government labs. Now they sat on shelves for anyone with a credit card. This model here, he said, lifting a small black device no larger than a matchbox. Records up to 12 hours on a full charge. I picked it up, turning it over in my palm. It was lighter than I expected. My fingers traced the cold, smooth edges, while my eyes studied the specifications card. What about image quality in darkness? Crystal clear facial recognition up to 10 feet, he replied, a note of pride in his voice. Infrared sensors activate automatically when the room's lighting drops below threshold. No need to touch a thing, and the motion sensitivity fully adjustable through the app. It won't trigger from shadows, headlights, or small movements, but anything significant, someone walking past opening a drawer, it captures instantly. Customers love this one. Very reliable. The device was called the Night Eye Pro Mini. The name alone carried a kind of quiet menace. It fit in the center of my palm, barely larger than the pocket watch my father once carried, yet far more powerful. 1080p resolution, 140-degree viewing angle, wireless connectivity. It was quite simply everything an engineer like me could want. I'll take it. On the drive home, the box sat on my passenger seat like a weight pressing against my conscience. 40 years of engineering experience, blueprints, assembly lines, systems design. I had built machines that could power cities, machines that could outlast men. And now here I was using my skills to set a trap. Not in a factory, but in my own home. Not for a stranger, but for family. The irony was bitter. The shame worse. When I pulled into the driveway, Helen's car was already gone, her shift at the supermarket stretching late into the evening. Cleo's truck was missing too. That left the house empty, perfect. Inside, I spread the contents across the kitchen table, like a surgeon preparing for an operation. The camera, the charging cord, the tiny mount no bigger than a coin. Each piece precise, each step in the manual clear. Mount. Connect to Wi-Fi. Download app. Calibrate settings. Simple technology, they said. But to me, it felt like a lifeline, a chance to peel back the mask. In my bedroom, I stood silently for a long moment, studying the space the way an engineer studies a blueprint. Angles, shadows, sightlines. The nightstand sat opposite the dresser, and on that dresser stood a row of framed family photos, decades of my life frozen in glass. Behind the largest frame, the 8x10 of Helen on her wedding day, was the perfect hiding place. I slid the photo forward, mounted the tiny lens just so, and stepped back to check the angle. Too high and it missed the nightstand. Too low and the lamp blocked the view. I adjusted 3 times before achieving optimal coverage: wallet, nightstand, water glass. Every detail visible. The app connected instantly, my phone screen blooming with a live image of my bedroom. The timestamp glowed faintly in the corner. Battery full, signal strong. I closed the curtains. The feed flickered, then shifted seamlessly as the infrared sensors engaged. Suddenly, the room glowed in shades of ghostly white. My bedspread, the dresser, even the creases in my pillow were etched in stark clarity. A chill prickled down my spine. The camera saw more than my eyes could. Motion sensitivity needed fine-tuning. Too sensitive and I'd drown in false alarms. Too dull and Cleo could slip through unseen. I set it to medium, then slowly I tested it. I walked past the nightstand, deliberately brushing the water glass with my hand. My phone buzzed instantly, the live feed capturing my every move. Proof. Evidence. No more doubt. I stared at the grainy black and white version of myself moving across the screen, an old man with tired eyes but steady hands. For the first time in months, I felt something sharp and solid forming in my chest. Not grief, not despair. Resolve. The trap was set. And the next time Cleo's hand reached for my wallet, the Night Eye Pro Mini would be watching. The camera had captured my test perfectly, the alert chiming on my phone with crisp precision. Proof that the system worked. Now came the harder part, the bait. I sat at the table methodically counting out $300 from the thin stack of cash I had left. Each bill slapped softly against the table, the sound heavy in the silence. 100, 2, 3. I smoothed them out with the flat of my palm, arranging them in the wallet, just so half visible, tempting, but not reckless. Enough to attract greedy fingers without seeming like a setup. The water glass went back in its usual spot beside the wallet. a habit carried over from my late wife, who had insisted I keep water nearby every night. Once it had been a gesture of love of care. Tonight it became a silent witness. Everything was ready. Camera hidden, bait positioned, app calibrated. I stood in the doorway and looked back at the room. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. Tomorrow morning would change everything. As the lights went dark, the tiny red indicator on the Night Eye Pro blinked once, then vanished into surveillance mode, watchful patient. Morning came with mechanical certainty. 7:00 sharp like a factory whistle from my years in Detroit. My eyes opened instantly, but this morning was different. I wasn't waking to confusion or to dread of another missing bill. I was waking to gather evidence. The wallet sat on the nightstand exactly where I'd left it, but my hand stiffened as soon as I picked it up. Light. Empty. The bills were gone. Every last dollar. No surprise this time. Only the grim, bitter satisfaction of a plan unfolding exactly as I had designed it. With a deep breath, I reached for my phone. My fingers trembled, not with weakness, but with anticipation. The Secure View app displayed one notification, one motion-triggered recording. Timestamp 2:47 a.m. Household sleeping time. Prime time for predators. My thumb hovered over the play button. I knew that whatever I was about to see would burn itself into me forever. No more doubts. No more rationalizations. No more maybe you misplaced it. Just truth. Cold, undeniable truth. The recording began in stark black and white. My bedroom still and silent. Then slowly the door eased open. A figure slipped inside with practiced care. Not clumsy, not uncertain. Confident. Cleo. The infrared lens caught his face with merciless clarity. There was no mistaking it. My son-in-law. My daughter's husband. Moving like he had done this many times before. Straight to the nightstand. No hesitation. No fumbling. His hand found the wallet as naturally as if it were his own. He slid the bills out, counted, quickly tucked them away. Efficient, professional, like a man running a well-rehearsed routine. And then my chest went tight as I watched him pause. Look at the water glass and pick it up. For a split second, I thought maybe he was curious. Maybe he'd put it down again. But no. He tilted his head, smirked faintly, and then spat deliberately into the glass. Not an accident, not carelessness. A calculated insult. A message. When he set the glass back in its place, my breath caught in my throat. How long I whispered to the silence of my room. How many times have I drunk from that glass? How many mornings did I unknowingly swallow his contempt? My stomach churned with sickness, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I replayed the footage. Once, twice. Each time my anger grew heavier, darker. The theft was bad enough. Cold, systematic. But that act that spit was personal. It wasn't about money. It was about humiliation, about domination, about telling me without words what he thought of me, a useless, gullible old man. But he was wrong. With hands steadier now, I saved the video to my phone, then to the cloud, then to a backup drive. Evidence like this couldn't risk being lost to some technical mishap. Downstairs, the house hummed with deceptive normalcy. Helen was likely in the kitchen humming as she poured coffee. Cleo, no doubt, pretending to sleep off his so-called night shift, the loyal husband who worked himself to the bone. I couldn't face them, not yet. Instead, I reached for the phone. My fingers found an old number one I hadn't dialed in months. The line rang twice. Jim Patterson came, the familiar voice, steady as ever. I closed my eyes, my throat dry. Jim, I rasped. I need your help. And I don't know who else to call. We'd worked shoulder to shoulder for 20 years before retirement, Jim and I. Shared enough long nights of troubleshooting stubborn circuits, enough lukewarm coffee from stained mugs in the break room to build a bond stronger than most men ever know. Jim, I said, voice already thick in my throat. Sorry to call so early. I need advice about something serious. On the other end, a chair creaked. He must have sat up straighter. What's wrong, buddy? You sound upset. I drew in a breath that shook more than I wanted it to. I just caught my son-in-law stealing from me. On camera, silence. Long enough to hear the faint hum of static through the line. Then slowly, are you absolutely certain video evidence? I whispered, staring at the frozen frame on my phone screen. Clear as daylight. Shows his face. Shows him taking my money. My voice faltered. Shows him doing things that prove this wasn't his first time. The words spitting in my glass refused to leave my lips. Too vile to speak aloud just yet. Jim exhaled heavily, the kind of sigh you only make when you know a friend is standing at the edge of something irreversible. What are you going to do? I pinched the bridge of my nose. I don't know yet. Helen doesn't suspect anything. She's in love, Jim. This will destroy her world. Evidence is evidence, Lester, he said firmly. You can't ignore theft just to preserve feelings. I know, my voice cracked, but she loves him, has no idea what kind of man she married. Maybe, I swallowed, maybe it's time she learned. We said our goodbyes, but his words lingered long after the call ended. Evidence is evidence. I sat there hunched at the edge of my bed, staring at the screen again. The camera's night vision had captured Cleo in stark black and white, his movements efficient, confident, practiced. The truth was laid bare in pixels. My hands ached from clenching the phone so tightly. Through the thin walls, Helen moved about the master bedroom, humming softly while she dressed for work. The sound pierced me. Soon she'd appear in the doorway, kiss my forehead, like she always did, and head off into the day, carrying with her nothing but innocence and blind trust. How could I tell her? How could I not? When I finally wandered into the living room, everything felt different, almost hostile. Same furniture, same lace curtains my wife had chosen 15 years ago, but it all seemed muted, suffocated under the weight of last night's truth. The morning light filtering in felt colder somehow, as though it too had learned to distrust. I lowered myself into my old recliner, coffee in hand. The first sip was bitter no matter how much cream I'd poured. Across the room on the side table, a leather-bound photo album caught my eye. Dust clung to its corners, but when I opened it, the past rushed out like a tide. December, their arrival day. I saw Helen standing in the driveway, tears streaking her face as she hugged me so tightly my ribs protested. Dad, we're so grateful, she'd said, her voice breaking with relief. Without you, I don't know what we would have done. Behind her stood Cleo, hands folded, head slightly bowed, wearing gratitude like a second skin. He'd shaken my hand firmly, eyes shining with what I thought was sincerity. Lester, I promise we'll get back on our feet quickly. Just need a few months to find steady work. I'll help with repairs around the house, he'd added eagerly. Earn our keep while we're here. I remembered smiling at them, both hearts swelling with pride and paternal love. Take your time. Family helps family. I closed the album with trembling fingers. The sound of its snapping shut echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. Now that very same man was stealing from me in the dead of night, and worse, mocking me, humiliating me in ways only malice could invent. The contrast between those smiling photos and the frozen video frame on my phone hit me like a hammer. One was hope, the other betrayal. One was family, the other an enemy sleeping under my roof. I pressed the phone against my chest and stared at the silent house caught between past promises and present truth. What do you do when protecting your daughter means destroying her marriage? What do you do when evidence screams for justice, but your heart pleads for mercy? That's what your mother would have wanted. Those first weeks had been wonderful, almost idyllic in their simplicity. Cleo had actually been helpful. He'd rolled up his sleeves like a man eager to prove himself, fixing the leaky kitchen faucet I'd been ignoring for months, cleaning the gutters just before the heavy January snow, even helping me organize my cluttered garage. For a while I'd thought maybe this will work. Maybe he truly values the roof over his head. We'd shared a couple of cold beers in the evening, sitting in the garage with the radio humming low. He'd spoken about his plans about finding better employment, about wanting to provide properly for Helen. I'd believed him. How could I not? His words sounded honest, his eyes steady. Helen had glowed with happiness. She'd loved having family close again, her father and her husband bonding, laughing, building what she thought would be a permanent arrangement. She'd already begun making plans for the next holiday season, talking about how we could decorate together, what traditions we might establish, how the house would finally feel full of family again. But somewhere along the way, the gratitude had shifted. Slowly, almost invisibly, like a frost spreading over a field in the dead of night. When had Cleo's respectful Mr. Hargrove become the dismissive Lester always said with a sigh, or worse, an eye roll? When had his helpful suggestions turned into bitter criticisms about my age, my habits, my supposed interference in their marriage? The change had been so gradual, I'd explained it away. Financial stress, I told myself. Job hunting frustration. The normal difficulties of three adults learning to share the same roof. I excused his sharp words, his impatience, his growing disregard. I'd told myself it was temporary, but looking back now, I could see the pattern. His complaints about my television being too loud. His suggestion, half joking, half serious, that I should eat in the kitchen while they used the dining room. His pointed remarks about old people who couldn't manage their own money. God, the irony of those words burned now. He had been stealing from me while accusing me of incompetence. The photo album on the side table lay open to Christmas morning. There was Cleo opening the expensive tool set I'd bought him, his face lit up with a boyish grin. There was Helen, radiant in her new winter coat, and there we were smiling together around the tree like some perfect family preserved in amber. 3 weeks later, Cleo had committed his first theft. Had he already been planning it that morning? Did he glance at me laughing as we sipped coffee and quietly calculate how to get into my bedroom unnoticed? Did he study my routines, my habits, the exact place I set my wallet each night? The thought hollowed me out. Love you, Dad. Helen's voice pulled me from my spiral. She stood in the doorway, dressed for work, purse slung over her shoulder. She bent down to kiss my forehead, the same gesture she'd given me every morning since they moved in. Love you too, sweetheart, I murmured. You seem quiet today. Everything okay? The weight of the phone in my pocket, of the video evidence saved on it, felt heavier than lead. How could I tell her? How could I destroy her world with a single truth, just thinking about things I said? Go on, don't be late for work. She smiled, relieved, and headed for the door. Then she paused, her hand on the frame. Dad, I know having us here has been an adjustment, but I want you to know I'm really grateful. Cleo is too, even if he doesn't always show it well. The irony was almost unbearable. After her car disappeared down Maple Street, the silence in the house pressed against me. I closed the photo album gently and placed it back on the side table. The faces in those December photos now felt like ghost remnants of a more naive version of myself, a man who had still believed in unconditional trust and the simple goodness of family. That man was gone. Now I had evidence. Undeniable, indisputable evidence. But evidence wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. What would I do with it? Confront Cleo and risk a blow-up that might shatter Helen's life? Call the police and end any chance of reconciliation, or stay silent, enduring theft and disrespect until there was nothing left of my dignity? I poured steaming chamomile tea into my late wife's favorite china cup. Her remedy for stress. But not even Martha's quiet wisdom could calm the storm inside me now. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the 2025 wall calendar spread open before me. In my hand, a red pen hovered, trembling. I began circling dates, scribbling notes in the margins, marking the thefts I now realized had lined up with his opportunities. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was building a case. January 15th. I slashed a crimson X across the calendar square, recalling the first real clash. That was the day Cleo tracked half the yard into the house, wet boots smearing mud across the hall. Despite my simple reminder, take your shoes off at the door. You old folks always find something to nag about, he said, his voice half amused, half dripping with contempt. Not even the slightest trace of shame. Helen rushed in, desperate to soften the moment. He didn't mean it, Dad. You're just particular about the floors. It's your house after all. But Cleo's eyes told a sharper truth. No apology, no embarrassment, only irritation, as if my very presence in my own home was nothing but a burden he had to endure. January 28th, another bold X. I can still hear his words. Maybe if you didn't interfere so much, our finances wouldn't be such a mess. All because I gently suggested Helen consider some overtime at the supermarket. Advice, nothing more. Yet his tone twisted it into sabotage, as though I were deliberately undermining their future. A single cruel sentence can slice deeper than silence, and that one carved straight through me. When I turned to February, the pen hovered reluctant. That month, the contempt quickened no longer rare flare-ups, but a weekly rhythm of disdain. February 14th, Valentine's Day. I pressed the pen so hard the ink bled through the paper. That was the day he draped a glittering gold chain around Helen's neck, a gift so extravagant she beamed all night. But I knew the truth. That was the very evening after I discovered my first $1,000 missing. Where else could he have gotten the money? He had studied me, mapped my habits. Every complaint about my outdated ways had been reconnaissance, every smirk a mask for calculation. February 26th. I circled that date twice. This house feels like a prison with all your ridiculous rules. That was the sentence that cut the deepest. Because Helen, my Helen, stood beside him and didn't protest. She bit her lip and then nodded. A tiny fleeting nod, but it was enough. Loyalty torn in two, and for once, I was the side left behind. Then came March. The X's piled up red slashes, spreading like bloodstains across the page. Old folks can't handle change. Maybe it's time to think about assisted living. Not everyone is capable of managing money, you know. Each phrase was a blade made all the crueler because I knew the truth. The very man questioning my competence was robbing me blind. While he mocked my fading mind, he left behind evidence of his own corruption. I snapped the calendar shut, my fingertips still smudged with ink. The kitchen clock read 7:30 p.m. Helen was still at the supermarket finishing inventory. Cleo claimed to be pulling overtime at the warehouse, but I no longer believed those lies. I knew better. I knew exactly what his nights were for. Tomorrow I would drive downtown, pick up the supplies I needed. Fresh locks, extra storage, a hard drive. Tonight I would plan. The hidden camera had already exposed Cleo as a thief. These calendar marks now testified to his character, his manipulations, his contempt. Two halves of the same truth. I rinsed Martha's teacup with care, running a cloth along the delicate porcelain, treating it with the reverence Cleo had never shown this house or the man who owned it. My hands trembled, but my resolve did not. He could scorn me, belittle my years, laugh at my routines. But Cleo had underestimated one thing: I was still capable of defending my home. And this time I would not stand by in silence. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of the final act, a lesson 3 months in the making. Cleo thought himself clever, thought he could erode my patience one insult at a time, one theft after another, until I surrendered my dignity along with my wallet. But some people needed to learn disrespecting the hand that fed you was not without consequences. And my consequences would be delivered with precision. Prankster's Paradise blazed in garish neon above the storefront, flickering pink and green, like the sign itself couldn't take the joke seriously. The place looked as though a carnival had exploded, plastic masks leering in the window, rubber chickens dangling from strings, bright posters promising hilarity in exchange for 5 easy payments of $9.99. I checked the address twice because surely justice wasn't supposed to wear such absurd colors. Still, I parked. Stepping out, I felt like a surgeon walking into a circus tent. But this wasn't about humor. This was about control, about drawing a line, about justice if justice could wear a disguise. Inside the store stretched up like a warehouse of foolishness. Shelves groaned under whoopee cushions, exploding pens, fake dog droppings, and rubber snakes with bulging eyes. The air smelled faintly of plastic and old popcorn, as though mischief itself had a scent. "Can I help you find something, sir?" The voice came from a girl who couldn't have been older than 19. Purple hair, silver rings stacked through both ears, nose stud glittering. To her, I must have looked like someone's stern grandfather, lost and bewildered in a wonderland of childish tricks. But she was polite enough and curious. "I'm looking for something that delivers consequences," I said carefully. "Harmless, memorable." Her lips curved into a knowing half-smile. Without hesitation, she led me to a glass case. "These shock novelties are some of our best sellers. People love them for parties." Inside the case, a bizarre arsenal awaited me. Buzzer handshakes, shock lighters, gag pens. My eyes settled on one item that looked eerily ordinary. A wallet. Black leather, well-worn at the edges. The kind of wallet a man might carry every day of his life. I picked it up, felt its weight. Perfect balance, authentic texture. My thumb slid along the stitching. It could have been mine. "How strong is the charge safe?" she assured me. 9 volts. Surprising enough to make them yelp, not enough to harm. Battery lasts 6 months. Define normal use. She tilted her head. Most people try it once or twice. Joke gets old. But this model's durable. Can handle repeat applications. Perfect. Exactly what I needed. I pressed the hidden trigger against my palm. A sharp crack of electricity shot through my hand, snapping up my arm like a whip. I gritted my teeth but did not flinch. A lesser man might have dropped it. Kurst laughed nervously. Not me. After 43 years of engineering, I could recognize elegant design, even in the service of novelty. I'll take it, I said simply. And anything else? Yes, counterfeit bills, the realistic kind, movie quality. For the first time, her confidence wavered. Her eyebrow arched slightly, but she turned and led me toward another section of the shop. She pulled out a box marked prop currency, for motion picture use only. I lifted a stack of hundreds. The weight felt right. The texture was astonishingly close to real. Under ordinary light, even I might have been fooled. Only close inspection revealed the faint watermark betraying its fiction. How much for $300 worth? $37.50. She hesitated. Plus $9.90 for the wallet. Call it $50 even. I handed her crisp real bills, imagining the symmetry of it all. Poetic justice, $300 in counterfeit to replace 30 real stolen by Cleo. He wanted to take my money tomorrow night. He would get exactly what he deserved. The girl bagged the items, carefully taping the wallet so it wouldn't go off in her hands. Hope this works out for whatever you're planning. Oh, it will, I said softly. It will work perfectly. Back in my car, I placed the bag in the trunk as though it contained evidence, not toys. On the drive home, I rehearsed the plan. After Helen drifted into her gentle sleep before Cleo's midnight rounds of theft, I would switch out my wallet, position it on the counter exactly where he expected it, inside counterfeit bills tucked with care, the trap set and waiting. At a red light on Maple Street, I glanced at the rearview mirror. An old man stared back. Ordinary, forgettable. Just a grandfather running errands before supper. Nobody would ever suspect that behind his steady gaze, he was weaving a lesson his son-in-law would not soon forget. By the time I reached the driveway, the sun was dipping low, washing the house in amber. Helen was at the stove, ladling beef stew into bowls, her hands moving with the familiar grace of habit. She set the table as though warmth could be arranged like cutlery, as though family could be restored with the careful alignment of spoons. I kissed her forehead, sat at the table, and let her chatter wash over me. But beneath her words, my thoughts were elsewhere, on the bag in the trunk, on the counterfeit bills, on the leather wallet that hummed with restrained electricity. The stew was hot, the bread soft, but I barely tasted it. Across the table, Helen smiled, trying to hold our world together with her kindness, and I smiled back, hiding the storm brewing beneath. Because tonight I would wait, tomorrow I would set the trap. And soon Cleo would learn my silence had not meant surrender. The kitchen glowed with soft yellow light, the kind that usually promised comfort and family. The stew Helen had prepared filled the air with the warmth of bay leaves, beef and slow-simmered vegetables. Yet beneath the homely aroma, something sour pulsed like a hidden current. Resentment, mistrust, the faint metallic taste of betrayal that no seasoning could disguise. "This looks wonderful, sweetheart," I said, letting my voice carry a gentle warmth, though my eyes never left Cleo. Across the table, my son-in-law hunched low, his fork tracing circles in the stew, instead of shoveling it down with his usual reckless appetite. His silence was unusual, and silence from a man like him was dangerous. "Dad," Helen began, trying to brighten the air, "you've been in the garage all afternoon. Working on a new project." I tore off a piece of bread, buttering it slowly, each movement deliberate, measured. "Just organizing tools," I said, keeping my tone light. "Amazing what you find when you really start examining things closely." Cleo's fork stopped midair. He looked at me then, suspicion flickering in his eyes. Something in my words had brushed against the truth, though he didn't yet know how deep my knowledge ran. Speaking of examining things, I continued, spreading butter with careful precision. "I've been thinking a lot about home security. Fascinating, really, the kind of technology that lets you see what happens under your own roof, even while you're asleep." Helen frowned, her spoon poised above her bowl. "Security, Dad? Are you worried about break-ins?" "Not break-ins," I said evenly, meeting Cleo's gaze. "More like internal security. Sometimes the real danger isn't from strangers. Sometimes it's from people who start believing other people's money is community property. The fork clinked against Cleo's bowl as he set it down, jaw tightening. There you go again, he sneered, the mask of politeness slipping. Always paranoid. Maybe you just misplace money and invent someone to blame. I let a small smile curl at my lips, cold sharp. Paranoia. Interesting word. Tell me, Cleo, how much did the warehouse pay you in overtime last weekend? The muscle in his cheek twitched. Why does that matter? Just curious, I replied, leaning back in my chair, tone mild but deliberate. Seems to me some people earn money very easily for very little actual work. Helen's voice cut in, fragile and pleading. Can't we just have one peaceful family meal? You two, you've been circling each other like enemies all week. Dad, you've been making accusations you can't prove, and Cleo. But Cleo's composure finally cracked. He slammed his palm against the table. I'm tired of this, tired of listening to complaints from a cheap old man who counts every penny like it's his last. The words struck like a slap across the face. Helen gasped, her spoon clattering against the bowl, but I only sat back staring at him as the echo of his outburst lingered. Cheap old man, I repeated softly, tasting the insult on my tongue. I folded my hands together, voice calm as a blade hidden in velvet. That's a fascinating choice of words, coming from someone living rent-free in my house. Lester Cleo started his bravado, faltering. I raised a hand to silence him. No, please, continue. I'm very interested in your assessment of my character, especially your thoughts about how I manage my money. Helen's eyes darted between us, panic rising. What is this? What are you two really fighting about? You're both acting like you know something I don't. I studied Cleo's flushed face, the sweat beginning to shine on his brow. Beneath the anger, fear had taken root. He knew he'd gone too far, revealed too much of what he truly thought of me. What he didn't know was just how much I already knew of him. Your husband and I said at last, turning to Helen, we just have different philosophies about respect. Isn't that right, Cleo? His chair scraped back, suddenly legs screeching against the floor. I don't have to sit here and listen to this nonsense. No, I agreed softly, my voice steady, unyielding. You don't. But remember, this is my house. He stormed upstairs, the sound of his heavy steps reverberating through the ceiling. Helen sat frozen for a moment, then began clearing dishes with trembling hands, the clatter of porcelain loud in the tense silence. Dad, she whispered, her voice breaking. What's really going on? You've both been strange lately. And now this. Sometimes I feel like I don't even know what you're talking about. I stood slowly, placing my napkin neatly beside my bowl. Sometimes sweetheart people reveal their true character when they think no one is watching. She froze with a dish towel in her hands, confusion written across her face. What does that mean? You'll understand soon enough, I said quietly. Without another word, I left her in the kitchen, the scent of stew now mingling with tension so thick it could choke. Upstairs in the privacy of my room, I retrieved the shock wallet and the counterfeit money from their hiding place behind the dresser. I held them in my hands for a long moment, feeling their weight, the promise they carried. Tonight, when the house finally sank into the hush of midnight, the final trap would be set. And Cleo, arrogant, reckless Cleo, would finally learn that every insult, every theft, every ounce of disrespect came at a price. Tomorrow morning would bring the confrontation months in the making. Tonight, justice crouched in the shadows, ready to spring. The bedroom was thick with silence, the kind that presses against your ears until every tick of the clock becomes deafening. The red digits glowed 1:57 a.m., carving numbers into the dark like an executioner's countdown. That was when I heard it soft, deliberate, and practiced the first footstep in the hallway. I slowed my breathing, feigning the rhythm of deep, peaceful sleep, even as my heart battered against my ribs like a fist demanding release. 3 months of humiliation, 3 months of watching from the corner of my eye while Cleo siphoned away trust along with stolen bills. Tonight, every insult, every theft, every smirk he thought I hadn't seen would return to him in kind. On the nightstand sat my chosen instrument, a plain leather wallet. Innocent, ordinary, almost dull in appearance. Inside, however, it carried the sting of retribution. A carefully concealed charge calibrated with an engineer's obsession for precision. Fake hundreds and twenties aged with creases and oils until they whispered authenticity to untrained fingers. every detail sharpened into place like the final piece of a machine. Another footstep, now lighter this time. My bedroom door opened hinges, whispering secrets to the dark. Cleo's silhouette seeped into the room, practice fluid. He had rehearsed this theft a dozen times, growing bold with success. He moved with the stealth of a predator, convinced of his prey's blindness, a burglar in his own family's sanctuary. I tracked him by the smallest cues, the draft of disturbed air, the faint scrape of a sock brushing wood. 3 steps. A pause. His eyes must have swept across me, confirming the slack-jawed face of an old man in slumber. 2 more steps. He leaned over the nightstand, reaching for what he thought was an easy victory. Then justice struck. The moment his fingers closed around the wallet, the room erupted with his pain. "Ah, what the—" His shout fractured the stillness, jagged and raw. 9 volts surged through his nerves, jerking his arm back violently. He stumbled, cursed, the counterfeit bills scattering across the floor in a paper blizzard, glowing faintly under the lamp's waiting halo. I opened my eyes with theatrical slowness and reached for the lamp switch. A warm yellow glow spilled across the room, exposing the crime in progress. "Oh my," I murmured as if half dazed from slumber. What woke me up, there he was caught. Frozen beside my bed, trembling hand clutched against his chest, surrounded by evidence more damning than shackles. The fake bills lay strewn at his feet, silent witnesses waiting for their testimony. His face was pale, the bravado drained away, leaving only fear and shame. "Cleo," I said evenly, "what are you doing in my bedroom at 2 in the morning?" He stammered, eyes darting, words colliding in his throat. "I was just getting some water from the kitchen." His tone cracked on the last word, his hands still spasming from the shock. "Water?" I swung my legs off the bed, adjusting my pajamas with deliberate calm. "And tell me, how exactly did those bills end up all over my floor? A leak in the faucet, perhaps? Bills, fake bills?" He swallowed hard, eyes widening with a desperate lie. "I don't understand what you're talking about." I leaned forward, picking up one of the scattered bills between my fingers, holding it up to the light. "The same way you didn't understand the other times you stole from me, or when you thought I wouldn't notice the way you spit in my drinking water." His face blanched. His lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, Cleo's arrogance dissolved completely. "Really," I continued, my voice low, sharp as a knife's edge. I reached for my smartphone on the nightstand, unlocking it with a swipe. My thumb hovered over a saved file, the thumbnail frozen in black and white grain. "Shall we review the security footage together? It's all here, Cleo. Every late-night theft. Every smirk you thought the darkness would conceal." His eyes widened in horror, the panic of a trapped animal suddenly cornered. The performance was over. The mask had fallen. 3 months of careful planning, of patient silence, had brought us to this precise, devastating moment. The trap had sprung. But I also knew this private reckoning could no longer stay hidden. What happened tonight would bleed into daylight, into Helen's world, into the fragile web of family. A new battle was coming. Tonight was only the first strike. "What's all that noise? Is everything okay up there?" Helen's voice floated from the hallway, sleepy, concerned, edged with that fragile worry only half-woken minds carry. Both Cleo and I froze, every heartbeat suddenly magnified, because we both knew it, this was the moment. The truth, long caged, was about to claw its way into the light. The soft shuffle of slippers against carpet came closer. Then Helen appeared in the doorway, framed in the lamplight. Her blue terry cloth robe hung loosely, her hair tangled from sleep. She squinted, trying to piece together the strange tableau, before her 2 grown men awake at 2 a.m., one clutching a phone like a weapon, the other trembling amidst a storm of scattered bills. Her gaze swept the room. First the money counterfeit bills strewn like autumn leaves across the carpet. Then Cleo's ashen face, his trembling hand clutched against his chest. And finally me, sitting upright in bed, eyes sharp, phone glowing with the damning evidence I'd been saving for this very night. "What's happening here?" Helen asked softly, voice frayed with confusion. "Why is everyone awake, Cleo? Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" I held her gaze, my voice steady, almost too quiet. "Your husband has been stealing my money for months. Tonight I finally caught him in the act." Her head jerked back, disbelief flaring instantly. "Dad, that's impossible." Reflex. Loyalty. The automatic defense of a wife. "Cleo would never, he'd never do something like that. You must be mistaken." Wordlessly, I raised the phone, my thumb hovering over the play button. Then watch this, and tell me what you see. Helen hesitated, shaking her head, clinging to denial like a life raft in stormy waters. But something in my voice, an unshakable conviction, pulled her forward. She stepped closer, eyes fixed on the screen. The video flickered to life in shades of cold infrared. The grainy hallway appeared first. Then Cleo, moving with the precision of a practiced thief, ghosting past the door, pausing and then approaching the nightstand. Helen leaned forward, lips parting, as if to stop the image, but the footage rolled on merciless. She watched as Cleo's hand reached into my wallet, plucked bills, and counted them with smooth familiarity. She watched him slip them into his pocket without hesitation. And then her gasp broke the air like glass shattering as Cleo bent over my nightstand and spat deliberately into my water glass. The phone nearly slipped from her hands. Cleo. Her voice cracked, her eyes brimming with disbelief and horror. Is that really you? And you spit in Dad's drinking water. Her husband flinched, his face crumbling. This is all a setup, he shouted, desperation clawing through his words. He's trying to frame me. That footage could be fake. Edited. You can't trust it. But Helen's gaze was fixed on the screen, her voice growing faint, almost childlike. But I can see your face, clearly. That's our bedroom door in the background. That's the shirt you wore yesterday. How could this be edited? Her defenses fell one by one, each observation hammering another nail into the coffin of denial. I said nothing. I didn't need to. I let the footage speak for itself. Let the silence between them grow heavier until it pressed against the walls. 3 months of lies were unraveling in real time, every thread snapping in her hands as the husband she thought she knew transformed into a stranger before her eyes. Please, Helen, you have to believe me. Cleo's voice broke his mask of confidence, long gone. I work hard. I work every day to provide for us. Why would I ever need to steal from your father? I leaned forward, my tone cold, deliberate, each word a verdict. Because you haven't been working, Cleo. You've been lying. Those expensive gifts you bought, Helen. My money, those weekends you claimed you were pulling shifts at the warehouse. More lies. Every ribbon, every dinner, every little gesture. It all came out of my pocket, out of her trust. The room fell into a silence thick enough to choke. Helen stood frozen between us, her world collapsing in on itself, her heart torn between the father she had trusted all her life and the husband she thought she knew. Cleo reached for her hand, but she flinched, recoiling as if burned. And in that instant, he seemed smaller, no longer the confident man of charm and bravado, but just a liar exposed in the harshest light. Helen sank slowly onto the edge of my bed, as though her legs could no longer bear the weight of what she had just seen. Her trembling hands covered her face, muffling the sound of her breathing, but I could still hear the ragged edges of it, sharp and uneven. The gold chain around her neck, the one she had once admired as proof of her husband's devotion, glittered mockingly under the lamp. That necklace bought with stolen money seemed to burn against her skin, now every shine a reminder of betrayal. The gratitude she had once felt for his supposed hard work, the pride in believing she had married a provider, all of it dissolved in seconds, leaving only ashes. How long, her voice broke through her fingers, small and hollow like a child lost in the dark. How long has this been going on? I swallowed before answering, the truth bitter, even as it left my tongue. At least 3 months. Probably since the day you both moved in. The silence that followed stretched unbearably, as though the house itself was holding its breath, the walls leaning in to listen. It was the silence of a wound torn open, bleeding slow, but deep. Finally, Helen lowered her hands. When she raised her face, the softness I had always known was gone. Her eyes were no longer a daughter's eyes, no longer a wife's. They were eyes sharpened by betrayal, stripped raw by truth. She looked at Cleo, and in her stare there was no love, only devastation, disbelief, and a rising disgust. Pack your things. The words fell like a sentence, quiet but final. She didn't even look at him when she said it, as though even seeing his face was more than she could bear. We're leaving tomorrow, Cleo stammered, desperate, his hand half reaching for her. Helen, but she raised her palm sharply, silencing him without a word. That simple gesture cut deeper than any argument. The damage was done. The line had been crossed. Trust once broken was not a thing that could be glued back together. By 3 o'clock the next afternoon, the house no longer felt like home. Instead of morning coffee and quiet routines, the air was filled with the sound of packing boxes, thudding against walls, drawers opening, and slamming shut, the shuffle of belongings being stripped from closets. Helen worked with heartbreaking precision, each sweater folded carefully, each dish wrapped gently in newspaper, as though dignity could still be preserved, even as her marriage crumbled. Tears would fall uninvited, splashing against a sleeve or a folded hem, but still she kept moving, mechanical, determined. Cleo, in stark contrast, moved like a man lashing out at the world. He stuffed clothes into boxes without care, slammed doors, muttered under his breath about injustice, about being treated unfairly. Every movement radiated resentment, his anger growing heavier as his lies collapsed around him. I stayed nearby watching but said little. Sometimes support wasn't about words. Sometimes it was simply about being present, an anchor in the storm, a quiet witness to someone else's pain. At last Helen spoke, her voice soft as tissue paper. "Dad, I owe you an apology." She didn't look up, her hands busy wrapping a stack of delicate dishes. "I should have seen it. I should have asked questions about where the money was coming from. I should have." "You stop right there," I said firmly, gently. "This isn't your fault. You trusted your husband the way a wife is supposed to. That's not weakness, Helen. That's what good people do. That's what family does." Her hands stilled. She glanced around the guest room, the temporary home that had become, without her realizing, the stage for this collapse. "I don't know where we'll go," she whispered. "I just know we can't stay here anymore." "You'll figure it out," I assured her, passing another sheet of newspaper into her hands. "You've got your job, your own income. You're stronger than you think. And Helen," I paused, meeting her tearful eyes, "this house will always be your home too. Whenever you're ready, the door will be open." Outside, the day was far less discreet. Cleo stomped back and forth to the truck, tossing boxes into the bed with angry, exaggerated movements, each one broadcasting his resentment like a flare. Neighbors' curtains twitched. Suburban curiosity was stronger than politeness, and I could feel eyes peering from behind glass, cataloging the downfall of the couple who had once smiled on the driveway. At last, Helen carried her final suitcase to the steps. She set it down, turned, and came to me. For a moment, she just stood there, searching my face, her own trembling with exhaustion and grief. Then she spoke, her words breaking and rebuilding her at the same time. "I hate that it came to this. But I'm glad you showed me the truth. Living with lies would have been worse." "Dad," she swallowed hard, her chin quivering. "I'm proud of you for having the courage to face it even when I couldn't." Before I could answer, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't just a hug, it was goodbye, and thank you, and I love you all woven into one. She clung to me for a long moment, as though gathering strength before the road ahead. "I'll call you when we're settled," she whispered into my shoulder. "I just need time. Time to process all of this." Then Cleo's voice broke the moment. The tailgate slammed shut, the sound violent in the quiet afternoon. He glared at me across the driveway, his face twisted with rage he no longer bothered to hide. "You'll regret this," he spat. "Destroying this family. Mark my words, old man, one day, you'll see who was really right." I didn't flinch. I simply held his gaze, my voice even calm as stone. "Just drive carefully and take care of my daughter. That's all that matters now." Helen climbed into the passenger seat without a word, without a glance back. The truck's engine roared to life, coughing diesel smoke into the crisp April air. I stood on the steps watching as the vehicle rolled down the street, carrying away both my daughter's heartbreak and her freedom. And when it was gone, the silence that returned was different, not the silence of betrayal, but the silence of survival. I stood on the porch long after their truck had disappeared down Maple Street, the taillights shrinking into the dark horizon. For a moment, I could still see Helen's profile framed in the side window, a mixture of sadness, strength, and a quiet determination to start over. My daughter carrying both heartbreak and dignity into an uncertain future. When I finally stepped back inside the house, felt utterly transformed. It wasn't just quieter, it was hollow, as though the walls themselves were exhaling after months of tension. The living room stretched larger, emptier, Every clock tick echoed, every shadow seemed sharper, and yet beneath the silence there was something else too, a fragile peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I brewed a single cup of coffee instead of the family pot. I had grown used to making the steam curling in the stillness, like a gentle reminder that life was mine again. Sitting down in my recliner with the evening paper, I let the weight of the day settle over me. Outside, spring darkness draped softly across the neighborhood. Porch lights flickered on one by one, and the scent of freshly cut grass floated faintly on the breeze. No more missing money, no more disrespect, no more walking on eggshells in my own home. Justice had not been revenge. It had been protection, the shield a father raises when love demands truth. And though the truth had burned, though it had torn open illusions and left scars in its place, it had also cleared the air. I thought of Helen's last embrace on the front steps, the tremor in her shoulders, the warmth of her tears against my shirt, the way her voice cracked when she whispered, "Living with lies would have been worse." That memory lingered like a bruise on my heart. I'd given her the truth, but truth is never free. It always costs something. Still, the engineer in me couldn't help but see the order in it all. Identify the problem, design a solution, implement the fix, verify the results. The plan had worked. The house was secure again. The storm had passed. I closed the paper and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Life would go on quieter but lighter, lonelier but more honest. Sometimes protecting family meant carrying the burden of being the one to shatter their illusions, even when it meant they'd never see you the same way again. I reached for my coffee, the warmth grounding me in the present moment. Justice was done. The problem was solved. And for the first time in months, I finally felt at home again. If this story touched you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you felt while listening. And when you're ready for the next story, just click on the box to the left. There's always more waiting to be told. Thank you truly for watching.